Have you ever wondered about the origin of the coloured gemstones you see in beautiful jewellery? The sapphires, rubies, emeralds, aquamarines? For example, the lovely but tiny pink sapphires in this ring, which retails for about $8,000 US. Well, it's likely they've come from the hands of artisanal miners, like those we see in the picture of women miners of sapphires in southwest Madagascar, who work in dangerous and back-breaking conditions deep in water. They receive just a small fraction, estimates are 1/100th of the final sale value. Over 80% of the world's gemstones are mined by what we call artisanal or small-scale miners, ASM for short. Have you ever wondered who provides the aggregates and building materials needed for the vast expansion in urbanization across the world, particularly in the emerging megacities of Africa and Asia? Often sand and gravel needed for cement are mined and processed artisanally, often by women, often in the most challenging circumstances, as you can see here in this photo of a woman sand and aggregate miner and her children in West Africa. So what is artisanal mining? So one widely accepted definition is that ASM is a rural livelihood strategy using simple tools and equipment, usually in the informal sector outside the legal and regulatory frameworks, exploiting marginal deposits in harsh and often dangerous conditions. However, the term also covers small-scale mining, which may include a level of mechanization. It may be formal, it may be seasonal, it often exists on the borderline between illegal and legal activity. Many different minerals are mined in this way. 30% of the world's cobalt, 20% of its diamonds and tin, 20% of its gold, and 20% of its coal. Approximately 1 million people, workers and their families, depend on artisanal and small-scale mining. This is compared to about 7 million people worldwide who depend on large-scale industrial mining. Artisanal mining may be combined with agriculture. For example, mining may provide capital for new crops, or artisanal mining may provide a means to survive in the time between harvests or when there is no rain and crops fail. Women make up to 40 to 50% in the sector as a whole, for example in artisanal gold mining in Bolivia, to as high as 90% in individual mining zones in Guinea. Children are frequently found working in artisanal mines and quarries. Teenagers may also be involved as apprentice miners to learn how mining is done. In many parts of the world, artisanal mining is a family activity and children become involved to help make ends meet or, for example, when a parent is injured. These young artisanal gold miners in the Ivory Coast were clearly proud of the work they were doing. They told me they were working to buy school equipment. Adult miners on the same site told me the sharp eyes of children were able to spot veins of gold more quickly than adults. ASM is a huge source of livelihood for poor people across the world. It is also complex and hard to regulate. In this talk, I will first give you some of what I have found to be the most useful theoretical perspectives on artisanal mining. These can be helpful in framing our thinking about some of the complex issues associated with ASM. I will then look at some specific issues, for example, some promising approaches to formalization, fair trade and the opportunities from certification, and finally, large-scale mining and artisanal mining. First, what motivates artisanal miners? Artisanal mining has been going on for thousands of years and has persisted alongside large-scale mining as a vital livelihood. Why is this the case? A useful frame is to consider the pull and push into artisanal mining. In the pull view, ASM is seen as being driven by opportunists and those after a quick and lucrative economic reward. This is typified by the rush phenomena. ASM is here referred to in terms of entrepreneurship and small business. In contrast, in the push view, ASM is seen as being driven by extreme poverty and failure to make a sufficient living from agriculture because of economic and pricing changes which could be brought about by structural adjustment policy, failure of crops due to drought or natural disaster. So, are most people pulled into ASM for the hope of getting rich quick, or are they pushed in through poverty? What do you think? I have seen both drivers. For example, I have met women mine owners in Africa who left work as teachers and doctors to open mines, and I have met subsistent miners who have no other options and are driven to ASM through abject poverty. Hilson, in his 2014 review, argues that the evidence from the past 20 years suggests that it is predominantly poverty that has pushed millions of people to take up ASM, and that related downstream industries have provided livelihoods for many who would otherwise have been unemployed. Another theoretical perspective that can help frame thinking is the notion of the poverty trap. Poverty traps are where the artisanal miner finds themselves trapped into a vicious circle of a low level of production that is neither sustainable nor capable of bringing well-being to the miner or their family. These traps can be related to a lack of skills, for example, little geoprospecting knowledge and poor understanding of the negative environmental impacts, which means that more and more miners find themselves on environmentally degraded sites with diminishing returns. Another trap is related to poor occupational health and safety. This will lead to flooding and cave-ins and landslides, as well as the unsafe use of mercury and cyanide in the artisanal mining of gold. All this leads to incapacitating accidents and poor health among artisanal miners. This can mean that the breadwinner for the family may not be able to work or may work on in pain, which reduces productivity. One response to this is to send younger, inexperienced family members off to mine. Such young miners are then at risk themselves, further locking the family into a vicious circle of poverty. What kind of poverty trap, for example, can we see here? Another poverty trap is a financial trap, as we can see here illustrated in Hilson's diagram. Most miners want to develop their business and need equipment to do so. A common trap for poor miners is to go into debt to buy cheap equipment which breaks down, leaving them further in debt, as is illustrated by this circle. A major issue in artisanal mining is related to the informality of the section. Many in artisanal mining, particularly women, are operating in the informal sector, which is unregulated with all the associated risks. Do you know how your government is dealing with the issue of informal and/or illegal mining? One common way that governments are dealing with this kind of illegal activity is through force. Governments can use force to clean up an area to remove unregistered artisanal miners. Another approach is to work with miners, as you can see here, where the government is working with miners to show them the advantage of getting a license, forming a cooperative to learn the basics of land rehabilitation or learn more about adding value to their commodity. In Tanzania, for example, loans are provided for miners who are licensed, but they have to commit to a minimum occupational health and safety and environmental protection standard. In Rwanda, the government has established offices to buy commodities from miners. Have you heard of fair mined or green gold or ethical gemstones? There is now a market for metals and minerals which can be certified as having been ethically sourced. For example, mined respecting certain minimum labour standards and occupational health and safety standards. Such certification can drive positive change. One promising approach by the Alliance for Responsible Mining, pictured here, encourages miners to improve their health and safety and environmental practice with training using the incentive of better markets through certification. This is exciting stuff. However, there is also a danger that such standards of certification can be set so high that many in artisanal mining cannot aspire to it. For example, a basic condition of certification is that no children be found working in the mines. In many poor rural areas where mining is done in family groups, this is not a reasonable option. Finally, I'd like to talk to you about large-scale mining and artisanal mining. This can be one of the most serious issues facing large-scale mining, particularly of gold, where there can be incursions by illegal artisanal miners onto leases, leading to violence and typically the deployment of large private security firms. This exacerbates local and ethnic tensions and gender-based violence and insecurity. Why is it important to consider artisanal mining in relation to a large-scale mining company's social license to operate? Well, many artisanal miners are part of the local community, and if you treat them aggressively, you can lose community trust. Better approaches are to consider the artisanal mining across the large-scale mine's life cycle. Were the artisanal miners already present at the time of exploration? Were attempts made to negotiate with them? Can land be set aside for artisanal miners based on the earliest assays and geology? Is it possible to develop a good relationship with local government, artisanal mine leaders and spokespeople, including women working on the site? Another approach is to share occupational health and safety procedures and processes and environmental management knowledge with local miners. In some instances, it may be possible to buy their gold. Finally, large-scale mining should expect the highest standards of respect for the human rights of artisanal miners from all their staff, including contracted security personnel.